Hello everyone and welcome to our Girls Get Set programme for 2023-2024. We are so pleased that you are joining us this year and we have some awesome events for you to join in over the next 9 months. My name is Amy Everson and I'm one of the team that are organising Girls Get Set for you this year. So before we dive into your first event, I wanted to talk to you about what you can expect over the coming months. Well, today you will be joining the first of 6 virtual sessions where we will be sharing different topics with you and get you to engage with us in various STEM activities. We will be coming into schools in January or February, bringing some mentors in, and we're going to be working with you on a hands-on challenge. You're going to get some amazing insight from people this year who've chosen a career in STEM. And we're going to be working very closely with you to help you achieve that Industrial Cadets Award. Lastly, and very exciting, in June or July, this is where you'll have a day out from your school and you'll come and join us for even more STEM activities. And we'll also present you with your certificates. Now, here's a really important part. Your workbook will be your evidence, so you need to keep this safe and make sure you complete it as we go through each session. So these worksheets, you should already have 2 sheets, your pre-work pages, and these should have been filled in as you were watching the 2 videos prior to this session. There's a Masterclass fun sheet. If you have some free time today or over the next coming weeks or months, have a go at that one. But today you need to focus on the remaining 4 sheets. So you should have 2 for Masterclass question time. Get those out when Darren does the masterclass in a couple of minutes' time. There's 5 questions there, and as he goes through his presentation, fill in the answers to those questions. And then for the last 15 minutes of the session, we're going to run through a masterclass activity. Claire will talk you through that, and those sheets are there to support that activity. That's it from me. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand over to Darren. Have lots of fun, girls, and enjoy today. Speak to you soon.
I want to give you a rundown on who Baker Hughes are, what are hydrocarbons, how are hydrocarbon reservoirs formed, how do we actually find the reservoirs, then how do we extract it, do we put anything back after we take it out. We'll have a closer look at a couple of pieces of the equipment that we would use for subsea oil production, and then we'll look at how we transport it to shore and what do we actually use the crude oil for. So we are Baker Hughes. We're an energy technology company. We take energy forward, making it safer, cleaner, and more efficient for people in the planet. So what we are focused on as an energy technology company is we are focused on producing energy in the most efficient manner possible and keeping it as clean as possible, reducing our carbon footprint. Now, our CEO, Lorenzo Simonelli, once said, energy is good, emissions are bad. And what that means is that energy is needed for everyday life. We need energy for transport. We need energy to keep us healthy, to power hospitals, healthcare, etc. But the emissions that sometimes burning fossil fuels produce is bad, and we need to control that. So what are hydrocarbons? So hydrocarbons are made up of carbon and hydrogen, and they are highly combustible, which makes them a very effective source of heat and light and energy. Now, the earliest known oil wells were drilled in China way back in the year 347. And back then, the oil was used for heat and light. So how are reservoirs formed? Now, it was a question that was in the earlier quiz, and I was pleased to see that many people got this right. So organic matter, such as dead animals and plants, basically are collated in areas and buried in the sea floor. Now, over time, it's covered up by silt and sand. And over millions of years, it gets buried deeper and deeper into the crust of the earth, where it is then pressurized and heated until it forms pockets of hydrocarbons. And today, we drill through all that silt, sand, and rock that's formed over the top of these reservoirs to reach the oil or gas. Now, how do we go out and actively find these reservoirs, these underground reservoirs of hydrocarbons? So in the first instance, a boat would carry out what's called a seismic survey, where it sends down shock waves of sound that penetrate through the water, penetrate through the sand and the rock, and when it comes to a pocket of oil or gas, it bounces back. And it basically gives the geologists who would review this information, it gives them an idea of what they are looking at through the rock, so they can see these reservoirs of oil or gas. Then to confirm that there is oil or gas there, a process called exploration drilling is carried out, where a large oil rig, a drilling rig, would head out to the site where the reservoir was initially found, and it would drill through the rock, drill through the seabed, and into that pocket, that reservoir of hydrocarbons. What we can see in the picture on the right-hand side is an oil rig that has found hydrocarbons. And the reason we know it's found hydrocarbons is the large flare, the flame coming off the left-hand side. And what that's doing is it's essentially well testing. It is testing the hydrocarbons, it's flowing them to the rig, and it is burning them off. Now, an area of technology and innovation where Baker Hughes is actively involved in is when you burn hydrocarbons, gas, such as you can see in that oil rig, not all of the hydrocarbons are burnt. So sometimes methane is released into the atmosphere, which we know is a greenhouse gas. So what Baker Hughes have actively involved in is enhancing that technology, that flare technology, to ensure that more of the hydrocarbons are burned, reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted into the atmosphere. So that's just one very, very small area of where Baker Hughes are actively involved in making energy cleaner. So how do we extract? Now we've found that reservoir, oil or gas, how do we actively extract that so that we can use it as energy? So we start at the very bottom of the page there. We can see two pipes that are penetrating the seabed. So the yellow structures you can see on the bottom are all sitting on the seabed. The two pipes, they're leading into the reservoir of hydrocarbons. And the hydrocarbons come out of these pipes and into what we call Christmas trees. Now, the reason we call them Christmas trees, because early iterations of this product looked exactly like Christmas trees, where they had large valves at the bottom, and eventually the valves would come in and in until there was a very top cap with a valve on it. So it looked like a Christmas tree. Now, a Christmas tree's function is to act as a tap, just like in your kitchen and in your bathroom. Basically, what a Christmas tree does is it controls the flow of oil or gas. So it can flow fast or flow slow. Now, if we follow the yellow pipes that come out of the Christmas tree, they go into a manifold. And what a manifold does is it collects all the oil or gas from each of the Christmas trees and puts it into a larger pipe. And the reason we do that is that we can collate it into a larger one single pipe, and we can flow that pipe back to either an oil rig on the surface, or in this instance, in this diagram, I'm showing a floating production, storage and offloading vessel, which would commonly be known as an FPSO. So all the oil or gas produced through the Christmas trees into the manifold where it's collected together, and then it's flowed back up to the surface in this instance. Now, where Baker Hughes is involved in taking energy forward, really focused on efficiencies and reducing emissions, is all this subsea equipment and those topside FPSOs or oil rig all require power. Now, typically, the power would be supplied by burning diesel generators to supply the power that would be required for to power all the equipment on the vessel and power all the subsea equipment. Where Baker Hughes is making a huge difference is we're actively investing a lot of money into renewable energy at the field, at the site where we'd be extracting the hydrocarbons. So on the top left-hand side there, we can see some floating wind turbines, and the smaller thin structures, you can see the three in the water, are wave power generators that is using the power on the top of the water to produce power for the subsea and topside hardware. So we no longer would be burning hydrocarbons to power the site. We'd be using renewable energy to help us extract the hydrocarbons. So let's take a look at a couple pieces of equipment in a little bit more detail. So my product line within Baker Hughes is the subsea Christmas tree product line, which is that picture you can see on the left-hand side. Now, to give you guys a kind of flavour of the size and the weight of a subsea Christmas tree, it's around 80 tons in weight. So that's a lot of steel. And that's the equivalent of roughly about 12 elephants. And it's about the size of a house, to give you guys an idea. So it's a very, very large piece of equipment. Now, what I've been focusing on in my team is reducing the size of a Christmas tree. Because if I use less steel, I'm reducing my carbon footprint. I'm using less energy to produce that piece of equipment that can then extract the hydrocarbons. So it's really innovative. My team have been looking at this really closely, and we've managed to do the same Christmas tree in half the weight. So 6 elephants instead of 12 elephants, half the size of a house. So it's really reducing the carbon footprint of our clients and actively helping them meet their net zero goals. Now, in that piece of equipment you can see there's roughly about 10,000 components that make up that one piece of equipment. So it's a complex piece of technology. Now, they're roughly about $5 million to purchase one of those Christmas trees. So that kind of gives you an idea of the technology that goes into producing this and the effort. Now, if I look at one of my colleagues, his product line is the subsea manifold. Manifolds are much larger. As you can imagine, they're collecting all the hydrocarbons from all of the Christmas trees and producing it into, in this instance, 2 larger pipes that then go back to the top side. Now, they're the equivalent of 450 tons, which is 70 elephants or a row of houses. That's how large these structures can be. So our Aptara, I've said Aptara in both of those pieces of equipment. Now, Aptara is a product line, a new innovation that Baker Hughes Oilfield Service and Equipment are actively working on, and it is to drive down the cost, the carbon footprint, the size, and the weight of all our equipment. So our new Aptara manifold is only 250 tons. So a massive difference in weight, an absolutely huge difference. It makes it much easier to transport. It reduces the amount of material we're using, again, reducing the carbon footprint. Now, a manifold would typically take about 20 months to make. So as you can see, there is a lot of time goes into manufacturing the equipment and planning out how an oil field or a gas field would be produced. And they have an approximate price of $20 million. So very, very expensive pieces of equipment. They're very, very high technology. Now, just to touch on something before we go back to transport and hydrocarbons. So we've taken all the oil or gas out of that reservoir and we've left an empty hole. So do we actively put anything back in there, or can we actively put anything back in there? And the answer to that is, in some instances, yes, we can. If the conditions are right, we can take carbon dioxide, which we know is one of the greenhouse gases. We can collect that carbon dioxide and we can inject it into that space. So by removing large volumes of carbon dioxide from power stations that are burning hydrocarbons, from large industrial clusters that are producing a lot of carbon dioxide, if we capture that carbon dioxide before it is released into the atmosphere, we can then put it into suitable depleted oil fields. Now, this can only be done through all the experience and all the knowledge that we've gathered in the oil and gas industry over the last few decades, where we really understand rock formations, we really understand reservoirs, how they behave, but it allows us to then take those emissions. Emissions are bad, energy is good. It allows us to take those emissions and inject them into these depleted reservoirs under the sea. So let's just quickly go back to transporting the oil or gas to shore. So the oil or gas, once it's produced, can be sent back to shore for refining in two methods. If we are close enough, like the picture down in the bottom right, there's a lot of oil fields just off the northeast coast of Scotland. So this particular pipeline network that I'm showing here is a gas pipeline network. So all the gas produced in that cluster of fields can be put into a pipeline and sent back to shore. In this instance, it goes back to one called the St Fergus refinery, which is north of Aberdeen. Another method would be what's called shuttle tankers. Now, these are very large boats that essentially act as taxis. They collect the oil or gas from the well site, from the FPSO or oil rig. They fill up the hulls of the vessels and they ship them back to shore. The picture in the top right is actually docked in a quayside location where it is offloading the hydrocarbons to be refined. And the last slide for me is, what do we actually use it for? So the picture you can see on the screen there is fractional distillation. And it's essentially taking that crude oil and heating it up. And all the different useful products that come from crude oil, they melt off at a different temperature. And we can collect them. So we're basically taking the crude oil and separating it into useful products. So if we start at the top at 20 degrees, we get refinery gas. And refinery gas is gas that we can use in our houses for cooking, for heating, or even we can bottle that gas and use it for barbecues, for example, propane or butane gas. Our next layer down then is our petrol for cars. Then we look at naphtha, which can be used for chemicals, for toxic chemicals, etc. Then we can look at kerosene coming off next for jet fuel, then diesel fuels, then lubricating oils, which is the oil you put in the engine of your car, and then the last kind of fuel oil, which is really heavy oil, can be used for ships, etc. So a really heavy fuel oil. Now, what's very interesting about the way that fractional distillation works is, if you remember back to the first slide where I showed a hydrocarbon atom, the very smallest hydrocarbon atoms tend to be gases. The longer atoms that are made up of more carbon and hydrogen tend to be the solids, and it moves through that list. So when we come down to the really heavy oils that are in solids, we can look at that for bitumen, and then we can take off plastics, etc., that we use in everyday life. So our last graphic, and I'm sure you've seen this in your workbooks. So what do we use oil and gas for? So as we spoke about, we use it for oil, for petrol, and I think that was one of the top mentions of uses for oil and gas. We use it for petrol or diesel for fueling our cars. Also jet fuel for planes. We use it in the construction industry for bitumen, for doing roofs, for doing roads. It's used in polyesters for clothing, etc. Accessories such as glasses, hearing aids, all wearable plastics like watches, etc., all come from the use of hydrocarbons. In our houses, in our kitchens, we can use it for our cooking utensils. We can use it for smaller appliances, electrical appliances in our kitchen that help us cook. It's used a lot in the medical industry. It can be used for medicines, such as some creams. It can also be used for things like, now I'm sure the GE healthcare team will know this, a lot of their machinery, plastic machinery, used for MRI scanners, etc., all use plastics that would come from hydrocarbons. Somebody mentioned in the chat makeup, beauty products, a lot of plastic furnishings, electronics such as our iPads, our phones in our hand all have plastic circuit boards, etc., all from the use of hydrocarbons. Our offices are full of plastics, typically from hydrocarbons. Sports equipment, so tennis rackets, footballs, and then again, lots and lots of toys use plastics. And these are typically what hydrocarbons are used for, not just fueling our cars. There is so many uses of hydrocarbons in the world, all around us. And where it potentially isn't used, Hydrocarbons you could probably trace back to the process of where other things were used. So a bit of a fun fact then. So America uses 1.85 billion barrels of oil a day. They are the largest consumer of hydrocarbons in the world as a nation. And with that, I'd like to say, is there any questions?
Yes, thank you, Darren. That was a really interesting presentation and hopefully gives everyone a good background of hydrocarbons when they move forward in this and Girls Get Set. While we wait for questions, Darren, one of the things I always get asked when I'm taking people around the site that manufactures Christmas trees is, why are the trees such a bright yellow colour?
That is a brilliant question, Claire. So an ROV, a lot of studies have been done because when we are doing offshore installations, we have remote operated vehicles in the water, which are little cameras. Now, the camera, when you're deep under the water, the best colour for an ROV to see underwater is actually pink. But not a lot of people will buy pink subsea equipment. So the next best colour is traffic yellow. So that's why a lot of the subsea equipment is painted yellow. White actually reflects the light and it makes it a little bit harder for an ROV to see. So traffic yellow is the second best colour for an ROV to see underwater. But great question.
Yeah, I would love to see our shop full of Barbie pink Christmas trees, but like you say, it's not going to happen. Um, got a question here from Lewis Girls. How long does it take to make a Christmas tree?
That's another really good question. So it takes Baker Hughes 14 months to manufacture a Christmas tree. And that time includes Baker Hughes ordering the raw material from steel mills and then going through the full qualification and manufacturing process where we manufacture all the material and then we assemble it, and it has to go through a very strict testing regime because, as I'm sure we're all aware, those hydrocarbons have to be kept safe and not escape to the atmosphere. So everything is pressure tested and tested with gas to ensure there's no leaks of hydrocarbons during the life of field. So it takes 14 months to produce those Christmas trees.
14 months is a long time. You can see how much work goes into them and why you would have to spend so much money if you were going to buy one.
Yeah.
There's a question from Wrexham. They're wanting to know if you can think of anything that doesn't use hydrocarbons.
So as this and that is a really, really good question, because as we move forward, and I'm going to use an instance that we'll all recognize here, Lego. So the company Lego has done a test recently, an innovation test recently, to make plastic Lego blocks out of plants. So they're using organic plants to manufacture the plastic Lego blocks. So there is a lot of innovation going on in the industry to see if there's alternative uses. We know we recycle a lot of plastics now, but there's a lot of innovation going on to find out if we can manufacture plastics from plants. So that's a very, very kind of interesting. It's a great question, because when we trace things back, we do end up finding that hydrocarbons have been involved in the process of manufacturing things somewhere. But yes, it's a really good question. But there's information available on the internet from Lego where they did an experiment at the moment. It has been very costly, and as you can imagine, the amount of plants that would be required to satisfy the amount of bricks that Lego would need to make would be huge. But it is proven that the process can be done.
No, it's a really interesting topic because we are so heavily reliant on oil and gas. We've been using it for so long that
Yeah,
we need to invent new ways of not using it,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
all takes time. And in between, then we still need to extract it from the ground and refine it so it's usable.
yeah.
This is an interesting one, and I wonder if you know the answer, Darren. Wrexham are asking, when were Christmas trees invented? So how long have they been in use?
Wow. That's a really good question. So I can from my perspective, Baker Hughes, if we trace our company back, our company initially way back in 1962 as a company called Vetco, which is now Baker Hughes. We installed the first subsea Christmas tree in 1962. And it was in the Gulf of Mexico, so off of Texas. And it produced oil for 20 years before we took it back. So a subsea Christmas tree, they've been around since 1962.
Interesting. I think we'll take a final question again from Wrexham. And I think this links nicely into another part of Baker Hughes' business. What happens if a Christmas tree stops working?
That is a really, really good question. A really good question. So, and something I'm challenged on all the time, because it is really important for us to have reliable products that withstand what we call the life of field. So typically an oil or gas life of field development would be designed to last for 25 years. So reliability of the product to ensure that it operates for that length of time firmly sits with me, and it is one of the main goals that I have. Now, what happens when it does stop working? Because there is instances that are out with our control that does make these things stop. But we can go out with a vessel. We go out with a boat, an installation boat, and we can stop the well flowing, and then we pick the Christmas tree back up, and we can take it back to surface. We can fix it, and we can rerun it. Now, Baker Hughes has all that capability. We basically span the whole side of the installation right through to decommissioning of oil fields in the division that we work in, the oil field equipment and services business. So that kind of technology, that innovation all sits within our business, and we're able to do that. But just as they're easily installed, we can run them on bits of wire. We run them through the water and land them on the top of that oil well. We can go back in and we can bring them back up to surface. But I have to say, it is very, very rare that a Christmas tree stops working. It's very rare. And I'm very proud of that fact. We've got good technology. But great
No,
question. Great
it
question.
is good, because if we spend all the money and resources that it takes to make a Christmas tree, we want to ensure it works.
Absolutely.
Because it would be a waste of energy as well if we had to continually manufacture new ones. So I'm going to move on now, because we've got a hands-on activity for you guys to do at the end. Keep posting your questions in the chat, and one of the team will get back to you, either Dan and Paige or myself. So for the last 15 minutes or so of this session, we want you to take everything you've learned today and come up with 3 interesting facts that you could share with your friends and family. When you leave the class today, when you go home, what do you want to tell them about what you learned today? So come up with your 3 facts. Keep posting questions in the chat, and that might help you come up with other interesting ones. But we want you to come up with a way to share those facts in an interesting way. So this is an opportunity for you guys to get creative. You could make a poster. You could make like a short social media video, a TikTok style video. You could do a song. It is really up to you how you want to do that. So there's some blank pages within your book, and I think you can split up into groups. And yeah, we will all remain on the call until past. So if there's any more questions or anyone else needs any help with anything, then we're here, and there'll be opportunities for your teachers to share with us what you've done when we come into the schools in early next year. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing your 3 interesting facts. Okay, I just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much for joining. I think it's been a really interesting session, and some great questions. So I know you've been listening, and I know you've done your pre-work judging by Paige's Menti quiz. There was lots of interesting answers on what oil and gas is used for, so it's really good to see. So there's three things that the team here at Baker Hughes want you to take away from today's session. So hydrocarbons are not just used for fuel. We saw through the Menti quiz, we saw through some of the questions, there is lots of things that we use it for. We are heavily reliant on it at the moment. So when you're thinking about renewables, it's great to think about maybe electric cars and solar power for your house, but there's lots of other things within your home that we need to find replacements for. So lots of people are working on that. Scientists are looking at it and what can we do better. Um, the next point is Baker Hughes are taking energy forward, making it safer, cleaner, and more efficient for people and the planet. And this means, while we are working towards these replacements for hydrocarbons, we still need to use them. We're still driving our cars every day. We're still heating our homes. There's loads of plastic everywhere that we can't do without at the moment. So what Baker Hughes can do is we can make it more efficient to extract that oil and use less resources in that process. So that's why we're developing the Aptara system that Darren was talking about, making things lighter. And young women, like everyone on this call, you can make a difference and you can work towards a future where we use less hydrocarbons, where we come up with interesting inventions like what's going on at Lego to replace plastic. It's people like you guys. You care about the planet and you want to work towards that future. So stick with your STEM subjects and you could go into lots of different interesting fields.